Hello and welcome back to the Comparesoft podcast. Today we're joined by Debbie Vaughn, Director of Field Services Delivery at Denali Advanced Integration. Debbie leads the delivery side of field service, supporting enterprise customers through large-scale deployments and ongoing support where SLAs, uptime and customer experience really matter. In this episode, we'll cover Debbie's day-to-day responsibilities, the KPIs and habits she relies on to protect those SLAs and customer experience, and what separates top performing engineers and service managers in the field.
Good.
Debbie, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to talk with you today. We like to start these chats by just getting a sense of your professional journey, your background. So you're currently Director of Field Services Delivery. What does a typical day look like for you, and what are your reoccurring problems you're constantly solving?
Well, my title today to my job is a very vague title compared to all the things I do. I actually oversee several departments today in my current role, everything from networking and infrastructure to managed IT, lifecycle management, desktop support, mobile device management, service desk, vendor management, staff augmentation practice. So I every day is different, which is exactly why I got into this field. It's how I found myself here. I'm one of those weirdos that thrives in chaos. And I think that to be successful in service delivery, you need to thrive in chaos because you have to be one of those people that's ready to just walk in with a fire hose, or a parachute every day and just tackle what's coming to you. Now, fortunately for me, I've got very good leadership under me, so I don't have to always be as in the trenches as I used to. A lot of my day now, I get to do more of the fun stuff, like dealing with sales and talking about, hey, we want to go pitch this to our client. Do you think we can do it? What does delivery look like? How would we be able to execute? What's cost of service on something like this? So I get to do a lot more in the pre-sales and more of the strategic portion, which is a lot of fun. That's also something that I have been working my whole career to get to. I think, though, that in a role like mine, that you're always straddling the line though between strategy and tactics, right? So this week, I was head deep into a massive escalation at the service desk, helping my team unpack that, figure out what next steps were going to look like, partnering with the customer, to get us on the right track. And then the next call was about, hey, can we service this new opportunity over in the UK? So every day looks incredibly different, but that's really why I am in this field and why I love it, right? So if I had a day-to-day, everyday boring, I'd wither and die. It's not my jam.
And you mentioned there about being in a sort of sales front end role as well, and obviously you've had that experience in sales and client relationship management. Would you say that experience has been fundamental when it comes to handling enterprise clients and large system rollouts?
Oh my gosh, 100%, because I've sat in all the seats. And what I typically say about myself is that I'm sales driven but operationally minded. Even when I was in sales, I always kind of had that process and operations background nagging at me. My sales leaders hated it, drove them nuts. But it's just always kind of been who I am and part of my DNA. But taking those nuggets from those years of experience and applying them now, I have a different perspective. And I think that transparently, that's why sales leaders do enjoy working with me, because they know that I am always focused on the back end on the sales, but yet I'll wear the operational black hat when I need to. I'll hold that pragmatic line. I'm not afraid to say, we can't do this, or I'm not comfortable with you presenting this to your client at this point in time. It's not ready, but here's what we can do. Right. So I think that having the experience of sitting in the chair, trying to keep the customer, sell the customer, now serve and deliver to the customer, just brings a good perspective. I jokingly tell people that my job description now is karma, because I actually answer to salespeople's promises now. So I have to execute on what they say we could do in a room. And so it's kind of full circle, right? But I do think that those different roles have certainly crafted me into the professional that I am, and have made me a person that sales is not afraid to bring along. A lot of times, you see sales or even customer success, they don't want operations or delivery in the room with their customer because they're afraid of what they're going to say, because historically we're very transparent, we're very blunt, like, no, we can't do that. But I think that I can put a finesse on it from sitting in that sales seat that has me, the fear factor is not there with bringing me along. My team's not afraid to put me in front of the customer because I will say it like it is, but I will craft it in a way that's not so scary or blunt. That us
You've got
operational
reasons
leaders,
for it. Yeah, you've got an
right? Well, yeah,
explanation
I mean,
for
we
it.
get a bad reputation, right? Like that's why the sales and operations fight
Mm.
has been going on for the millennium.
That's awesome. So you just touched on it there, coming full circle with sales. So you've been a part of these large IT network system rollouts, and they focus heavily on, particularly on SLA compliance, customer retention, etc. From your experience, what are the most important things to get right to make a multi-site rollout run smoothly?
Well, I think the most important thing to get right is understanding what's important to the customer. You can come in as the integrator or the managed services provider, what have you, whatever your company's title is, and you can think that this is how it needs to be done because you've got the expertise, and you're partially right. I mean, your job is to come in and guide the customer on what a successful rollout looks like. Of course, bring best practices to the table, bring where your milestones must be hit to the table, kind of those, like, this is non-negotiable. But then if you don't take the time to partner with your customer and figure out what good looks like to them and what's most important and what maybe their users are going to face, getting in there to really understand the problem statement and why they're actually implementing the product or doing the rollout, and then figuring out what those success metrics look like together, because there's a difference between a vendor and a partner. You can come in and be a vendor all day, but you may show up into a room with the CIO thinking that you're knocking it out of the park, and she kicks you out because you're dead off. You're dead wrong as far as what is important to the customer. So I think that creating those success measures together in the beginning is one of the most important things, like laying that groundwork out, figure out the why for your customers so that you can actually build your practice to match that. And then the other most important thing, never take your finger off the pulse through the whole process of the voice of the customer and the temperature. Do not be afraid to highlight risk, and do not be afraid to show red. I think that is where I see failures along the line in some of these implementations I've been a part of, where, again, I joke, but I'll go back to the sales versus operations fight. Sales does not want to show red. Well, guess what? You have to. The customer is going to call you out. They know. They know. If you walk in there and you say, everything is on track, nothing's at risk, there's no yellow, they're going to call your bluff and you're going to get chewed up and spit out. And then you lose trust. Now you're a vendor. Right. So I mean, there are absolute tangible, did I hit this milestone? Are we on budget? Are we on time? Are we, going to meet fiscal targets, et cetera, et cetera? Those are things that you have to have on the back end you have to track to, you can measure them, right? But there is the more untangible items that cannot be lost in the process to show a good successful rollout. Even if you come in with a sheet of red, if you're a partner not a vendor, you're going to work with your customer on prioritizing that risk list, tackling the most important first, figuring out maybe which ones need to go to a phase 2. What does an MVP look like? Those things are what, to me, make a successful integration or rollout, because even if you face adversity, it's how you overcome that along the way in partnership with your customer, that at the end, you're holding your hands up together going, we did it. Instead of at the end, you're like, oh, we just had this flawless implementation. We're out now. And the customer's going, I don't know why we hired them. Worst vendor I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Wow. And so it brings me really nicely actually to a point where if you were, thinking what the end customer really values the most, how would you prioritize between speed, communication, or quality? What one are they seeking the most out of this delivery?
Do you know, there's an old saying called, you can have it good, cheap, or fast. You can have two, you can't have all three. Have you heard that saying?
Mm-hmm.
Good, cheap, or fast? I think that's kind of your question, right?
Yep.
So I do believe, though, in from my perspective, I think they value communication first, accuracy second, and speed third. You can oftentimes explain away speed. You can go get leniency from your leaders. You can go to the board and say, here's what we're facing. Here's what happened. Here's why. Here's how we're overcoming it. However, it's not going to be implemented by next week. We're looking at a target date of X. But because you communicated and because you can come in with a clear statement of what's transpired and how you're going to overcome, many times then the speed can be dealt with. It really can. Even when they tell you it absolutely can't, we're expiring, we're going to lose our service, they're going to fire us, like we're not going to have our vendor by the end of the month if you're not done with this. You can always find a way. There is always a way. But you need to be very, very clear in your communications and establish a plan.
Communication is so key to understanding and prioritizing, as you mentioned earlier,
Well, and transparency. Don't just communicate, but be transparent. You don't have to let them completely behind the curtain. I mean, they don't have to go all the way into the sausage making, but you just can't be afraid to highlight where the issues are. And more importantly than that, many times the issues are on the customer side. They know this. Highlight it. Say, okay, here's what we're facing. Part of this is us, part of this is you. Now, how do we overcome this and what does this look like going forward? Because customers know they have their own ish.
And you've been involved in a lot of these conversations, I'm presuming. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Many. I'm actually I have one of those. I'm a good translator, so I can take this super techie, nerdy problem statement that's 2 pages long, full of jargon that makes a C-suite glaze. And I could take it and put it into language that says, so if I heard you correctly, basically we're hitting a wall here. If we don't overcome this, we can't do this, right? And they're like, yes. Okay. So now I could take that over here to my executive board and say, here's the problem. Here's what we need to do. Until we do this, we can't do this, right? Like you need to be able to do those translating conversations, and then you have a lot more success with the business who doesn't really understand what how the sausage is being made. They just know that they need it made and they don't care either, right? So being able to take all of that jargon and translate it down into a simple conversation, that's a key trait you need to have in a role like this, I'd say.
And you mentioned there, so understanding the metrics, how you measure success. Obviously, when you're running service delivery at scale, you kind of want to, but it must be tricky trying to manage everything. So you kind of need those small set of signals or metrics you trust. What are the KPIs you rely on to manage team and operational performance on a day-to-day basis? What are you looking at?
The KPIs that I think any and all orgs use and I rely on, they're your how fast did you fix it or how fast did you respond to it, right? So your speed of response. Did you fix it the first time? So did you waste the customer's time? So speed of resolution, obviously, or mean time to repair, as it's called, your response time, overall uptime if you're keeping an enterprise alive, obviously, because it's really easy to hone in on the one bad thing that happened. But when you look at trend and volume and scale, you realize that really 99% of the time you don't have any problems. So people hone in on that 1%. That's a good conversation to have in those ugly QBRs where you're going to come in, you've had a black eye on something. Because listen, we wouldn't have jobs if you didn't ever have things like this happen. If technology was perfect, we all wouldn't have jobs. So clearly, you're going to have to face some of these conversations. But I think being able to look at the trends and the scale, so that's why I like to look at the overall volumes and the actual percentages month over month or quarter over quarter to say, listen, I understand we had this one thing where, yeah, we dropped the ball. You're right. Your ticket sat for 10 days. We couldn't get it fixed. We sent the wrong parts. Everything under the sun happened. At the end, we got it fixed. This is what we did. But overall, we're pretty good, right? So those are the key ones that I look at always from a black and white on paper. What are we doing? How are we performing? The other things I look at, though, that are less tangible well, this is very tangible, the voice of the customer, clearly. Voice of the customer, you always have to keep that in mind because, again, we have also, every leader in my industry has walked into a QBR shining ear to ear with a green metric sheet, and the customer is like, our employees hate you. And you're like, wait, what now? We're doing what? We came in here to say that we were doing a really good job. Oh, you are, but you kind of suck with a bedside manner, and now my employees don't want to deal with you. Oh,
Okay.
okay. so
Wow.
so
Yeah.
that's when you have to take that balance, right? Of kind of reading the room, applying some critical thinking. Maybe you break some process to hold the hand of a VIP user, even if it's going to hurt your metric. Maybe you're not going to close that ticket when you're supposed to because you know that this user's not happy. Again, this is why you can't take your eye off of that. And then the other key one is your employee satisfaction. So your voice of the employee is just as important because we have a tendency to run our field teams ragged. Again, it's an industry thing. We do it. We run our guys into the ground, and guess what then? When they're burnt out and they're tired and they're feeling undervalued and underappreciated, you don't think that shows when they walk into that customer site or when they're dealing with that end user? Then now suddenly that impacts the customer experience. So you have to have happy, healthy, engaged employees, happy, healthy, engaged customers, and then you have your black and whites to back it. So I think that the emotional a lot of times outweighs the black and white when it comes to overall service delivery success.
That's fascinating, that someone can have so many clear green metrics, as you would say, and still have an unhappy customer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It happens more than I think you probably realize. Like,
And
but we're
another
doing good. We're
really,
not doing bad.
yeah, and another really interesting thing is that there is, it's industry known that you just let the engineers burn themselves out. You work them into the ground. In our experience, teams that spend most of the time in the field feel isolated as well, even in really strong organizations. So, what do you do to keep engineers connected and valued, as you said, when they're in the field?
So for some reason, I'm generalizing obviously, but I've had several roles and I've worked at several different companies, and this has been a trend. So I think I'm safe to say that it's a trend in the industry that we put our field teams almost out on an island. Their jobs to be on the road, their jobs to be hopping from site to site, job to job, either fixing, implementing, building, what have you, whatever it is. We suck at bringing them into the fold and giving them the context and the why and explaining kind of what the direction of the company is, how their job directly impacts the success of the company or the success of the specific customer they're servicing, what the customer is saying about their work, or how literally they impact the success of a project or a contract. They deserve to know that. Every employee deserves to know what good looks like in their role, and they deserve to know how they directly impact it and what the downstream is when they don't do something that we ask them to do, right? So one of the best things I did, and this is a little tidbit for leaders out there, get on the road. Get on the road and go see your field teams. I did a road show a couple years ago when I was running my biggest field team, and they were out on an island, and their job was to be productive all day, every day, run as many tickets as they could. But nobody took the time to stop and explain to them kind of the why, where we were sitting with the contract. At the time, we were hemorrhaging money. They would never know that. They thought we were killing it. They just thought that we were just basically beating them with the stick instead of giving them a carrot. And so I went out and I did regional road shows. I pulled them off the field for a day, came to a conference room, had an open forum, met them, shook their hand, explained, showed them the financials, explained to them where we were getting beat up, where we were crushing it, why we were pushing them so hard on productivity. The change in the attitude in my team was almost overnight. It was so fast because as leaders, we tend to get stuck behind our computer. We tend to get stuck in the trenches in the day to day handling, with our fire hose. We lose sight of the fact that these guys need connection. They need to be connected to something bigger. They need to know that they're a part of something bigger, and they need to understand how they impact the big picture. And so for something example, here's a simple example: filling out your closure notes. Struggle with every field engineer in the nation, getting them to write thorough closure notes, say what they did, get it done in time. Well, in this particular contract, if the closure notes weren't done in a satisfactory manner to the customer and or within a timely manner, they wouldn't pay. They fought the invoice. So we ended up with hundreds of invoice disputes from something as simple as closure notes. Well, if you tell your guys what happens when they don't do and what the actual outcome is, you see a change in majority of them because they don't want us to not get paid. We're not a 501c3 nonprofit. They want to keep their job. They want a successful role. Suddenly my notes were cleaner. And I mean, it's something as simple as my rule for all engineers. It's you just got to operate under CYA. Everybody knows what CYA means, right? So that's how you need to operate. Fill out your paperwork so that nobody can ever come back and question what you did, how you did it. There's just no question.
Yeah.
And once we started applying that basic principle to our operations, we definitely had a turnaround on that. But like that's just one little example of something that an engineer, if you don't take the time to explain that to them or explain that to your field tech, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing and think that you're just being nitpicky
And
because
you
their job
saw,
is not to do paperwork.
yeah, and you saw that measurable difference between before that day you took them aside to after that day you took them aside.
Hugely. But this is, I mean, this was a big bad deal. We had taken over a team from another team and the communications of what their role was going to look like. Everything was just kind of messy for these guys. So getting out in the field was the best thing I could do for them. It cost my company money. We were losing money. It cost my company money for me to go do this. And I just remember talking to my boss and I said, we can't afford not to do this. We're going to keep trending in the wrong direction. You're going to keep getting shattered on Glassdoor. Your team is unhappy. They're going to wear that when they walk in to the building to service the customer. That's going to pop out. We're going to have bad behavior. We're going to start getting customer complaints. So 100% what happened was exactly what was happening. And I'm not saying it was like a 100% turnaround, but that roadshow went so far. And then after that, I was like, okay, so what do you guys want? And it turns out they did want town halls. They did want all hands meetings. They don't want them all the time. I mean, that's not how they're wired and it's not how they make their livelihood. But it was important for them to stay connected to their leadership and hear what was going on in the company. What's going on my team? What's our next direction? Do we have anything cool coming down the pike? Is our company doing anything cool? Are we going to be a part of that? How can I help? How can I get on that? And it just really goes a long way. And I just think as operations and delivery leaders, we're not always great at it.
And for you, when you saw that in practice, did that completely change your mindset on how you're going to manage these engineers? How you're going to go about things after this?
100%. I did not always have the best reputation of being the most like touchy-feely leader. Um, Pretty non-emotional, very black and white, and I learned from my old boss, my mentor, hey, you can't stay that removed. You've got to you don't have to know everything about them, because you don't want to get so emotionally entangled that you can't make good business decisions. That's kind of one of my rules of thumb. I stay enough that I don't ever get impacted on a business decision by something emotional, right? Uh, but I learned to lead differently in that touch, that high touch, and that giving the why and taking the time to apply context and making them feel a part of something and understanding what they want their journey to look like and what's important to them. I really learned to apply that. And then when I came into this particular role I'm mentioning and I was like, oh my gosh, I thought wow, okay, no, 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 we got to give these guys some love. Like we need to openly communicate, over communicate, keep them connected, stay in touch. Because we had 300 and some engineers across the nation. It was a big team, really big team. And we were servicing a very large contract I mean, the volumes were high. The pace was crazy. It was a beast, but you really have to carve that out. So now wherever I go, I apply those practices and I try very hard to break down those silos of communication and foster cross collaboration. Like right now, I mentioned in the beginning my role, I oversee a gajillion different departments, right? When I first joined or before I joined my organization, they were all very siloed. They were in different pillars. Nobody even knew what the other people did. They didn't even know who each other were, let alone, and the org's not that big. So I did start doing that right away, and we brought everybody into one main org under the same leadership. We centralized, started to do more cross collaboration, pulling people from maybe the desktop team over to help with some low level data center break fix work or implementation work, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow and that's how you develop, right? So that mentorship has to be there as well. So I think having the open communications and bringing everybody in helps foster that as well. The older guys meet the younger guys. They could talk about kind of the challenges they're facing. I mean, this all happens more in your all hands or your town hall type discussions. But I think that they're really, really important to keeping a high employee morale and that directly impacting the customer experience.
Excellent. And you touched on it earlier, so you have led hundreds of engineers and service managers, and that's across different regions and countries as well. What behaviors do you feel make top performing engineers stand out, particularly in like a customer facing environment like yours?
There's a unicorn engineer out there that is the hybrid, right? That is, they don't have to be the top guy who wrote the code behind the piece of equipment, you know, but typically they're a high tier 2, low level tier 3, but they have great bedside manner. So they know who to reach out to when something gets out of their reach, but they have the ability to connect and communicate with their customer. To me, being able to work with the customer, have that good communication, lines of communication, be patient enough to explain, but know who their resources are if they get stuck. To me, that's the most successful field engineer. And the scrappier, the better. The one that comes in and has the do whatever it takes attitude is the one that wins. I've seen it several times. A technician shows up, there's a part missing. They leave. They close the ticket, they leave. They go on to their next job. And the customer says, "What happened?" "Well, the part wasn't there." Well, turns out this part's something that potentially was easily sourced at a local hardware store. Maybe it wasn't even a part, it was something needed to get into the piece of equipment you were working on. Something simple. Well, go to the hardware store and get it and come back and fix the customer. Yes, you might have a little bit of a delay. I mean, make sure you're not going to totally mess your day up, but take that extra step. Show the customer, let me see what I can do about this. Let me see if I can get something here quickly. I'll stick around. Let me call into my service desk, et cetera, et cetera. The one who does whatever it takes is the one that wins, because that's what stands out.
Obviously, you touched on the hybrid unicorn. It kind of feels to me that you would prioritize a more customer facing attitude over maybe technical skill when it comes to hiring today. Is that correct?
Well, I think it depends on what role I hire them into. So if I'm building out a super high end resolver group that is primarily going to be working remotely into systems, they're not going to be actually shaking hands and kissing babies. I'm not going to prioritize communication. I'm going to prioritize technical expertise. That said, I am going to put safeguards in place to protect them from themselves, because odds are they're not going to be the best communicator. Many times they're not. So you've got to be able to put a buffer in there that you don't just throw them into the customer wolf den and put them in a position where they're going to be uncomfortable. They just want to fix it. Uh, I'm going to put those safeguards in place to make sure that they don't have to do that communication. They just need to be the technical expert, give advisement, fix it, work with another engineer. Now, if I'm hiring somebody that's going to go out in the field and they're going to be a lead, they're going to be liaising with our customer contacts on site. They're going to be the face. I'm going to make sure, again, that I've got remote resolver groups with higher level expertise that they can rely on, whether they call them, they teams them. I mean, with technology today, you can video. I mean, you can show like, I'm looking at this. What do I do? Customer doesn't need to know that the engineer needed to do that or the technician needed to do that. They just know that this great guy is here to fix this and make everything right. And I feel good when he's on site, and I feel like he's got a handle on it. He's acting like he's been here before. He knows what he's doing. That's who I'm going to send out in the field. So, but both of those instances, you have to give those people tools to make them successful, you know, all the way around, right? Like I said, your customer facing might not be the most highest end technical. Well, then give him the reach back. And then your most technical, typically they're not the best communicator. Then don't make them do that. give them give them the funnel to be able to
Play to their
say, okay,
strengths,
can you call the
essentially.
customer?
Mm,
Right. Yeah. Give them reach back. Both of them.
yeah. Yeah. Um, my role here at Comparesoft, I'm fascinated by how tools and technology are used, how they're implemented, when they fail as well. How did they fail? Um, and just looking at some of your achievements, like reducing employee attrition, maintaining SLA compliance, I think it was above 95%, and that client retention as well. I'm really interested in knowing the tools that have been essential for you helping achieve these success rates.
So people process tools. We all know this. I believe in automation, but I believe that you should automate process and not automate people. And I believe that a tool is exactly what it should be, a tool to augment your processes and your people, right? One of my claims to fame, I'll call it, or most successful things I started doing in my journey was hosting something called an operational interlock. And what that really means is you operationalize the contract. Everybody gets handed to their service desk a statement of work or a contract that was signed with these black and white KPIs and these SLAs you have to achieve, et cetera, et cetera. Well, an operational interlock is meant to break that down into actual workflows that you decide between you and the customer. You have to understand at a high level the customer's workflows before you can build your workflows to match, or your SLAs break. Oftentimes they break. So this is one thing I highly recommend. And the way I did it, you don't have to do it this way, but the way I did it, I flew to that customer. I got in a room. I made sure they had their stakeholders. I had my stakeholders. We had the agreement. We had a whiteboard, and I locked them in that room for a day and a half. And we went through those workflows. And I needed to understand, what does it look like when something breaks on your end? Okay, how does that come to me? Now, how am I going to respond to you? What ticket system do you have to update? What platform do you need to put stuff into? Do we need to connect those platforms? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first thing you do. You break down, you operationalize the contract. Then, more importantly than the actual SLA, are the underlying OLAs. If you don't take the time to put operational level agreements into place that are built to actually have you achieve the SLA, again, that's where you see those things break. So if you have 4 hours to fix, okay, you have a 4 hour resolution time in your contract, and that's your SLA. You need to go in and you need to break that down backwards. How do we achieve the 4 hours? In how many minutes does my service desk realistically have to get this in the hands of an engineer? How many minutes does this engineer, tier two, have to look at this thing before he decides he's got to punt it to the next level resolver group? How many minutes does this guy have before he can actually get in there and apply the fix? So let's say listen, when it comes in and it's a priority one, you have 15 minutes. Service desk, you have 15 minutes to triage this ticket. That's it. Then it's got to be in an engineer's hands, period. Engineer number one, you have 30 minutes to determine whether you can do something with this or not. If you cannot, it must go to the next level. That establishing those OLAs were crucial in achieving that high level of SLA compliance. But many companies overlook them. They overlook them, and then they don't take the time to build them into their platforms and actually say the clock is ticking. Instead, they run off an overall clock. Now, the next thing you know, you're giving your tier three engineer 15 minutes to fix something, and the same thing is with, like, when I talk about the operational interlock. Okay, Mr. Customer, what does this go through before you send it to me? Oh, well, it goes to my service desk, and then my service desk looks at it, and da da da, and then we send it. And if we can't fix it, then we send it to yours. Oh, okay. So when does my 4 hour clock start then, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Because now I'm like, you're going to be mad at me because I'm going to have 4 hours, and you're going to think I have no time because this was a P1 on your side. So those are the types of conversations that you have in the interlock, and then you establish those OLAs together and build those workflows and figure out, what's important to them, and what does change management mean to them. I can tell you what change management means to me. What does it mean to them? And what does that have to look like? And then you apply, your practices overlapped on top of theirs. Because let's be real, anytime you bring a new provider in, it's very painful. It's incredibly painful to you, to the customer. You spend the first year stepping all over each other's toes, not communicating well. Usually they're mad. These interlocks went so far in preventing those conversations. I cannot recommend them enough.
And what I love there is it started with a whiteboard, you know?
Yeah, and then you document the whiteboard, and everybody gets a
Yeah,
copy of the run book. So you basically
yeah,
make a playbook, but you do it together instead of shoving your process onto them.
yeah, that's essential. And what I love there, you touched on, we talk about automation to make processes and not people. So it kind of brings me into wanting to understand how you feel about going into next year or the years beyond. What's one tech investment that these service delivery teams should prioritize going into next year? You know, what problem should it solve?
I do think we have had the age-old battle of how do we get our resolver groups to be more proactive. MSPs go out into the world and they tout that they're going to be proactive. We're going to tell you when something's wrong and we're going to fix it before you know. We're still living in a very reactive world because we're still hindered by the level of tool we can apply and the alerts we receive and the information we get from the equipment. It's still not there. I'm very excited for what these AI applications can do for predictive failure analysis, more insightful alerting for knocks, giving more information. You still need the human at the end of the game to intervene, or at the end of the day to intervene. But if these applications can actually provide more information quicker, more detail, and set our resolvers up for more success to be able to fix it the first time, not waste a trip out there with the wrong parts because we can't get a decent diagnosis or we can only see this much into the system, I'm excited to see what that can do. So I do believe, and again, though, it's a tool. It's meant to augment. It is not meant to replace. Do not go thinking that you don't need a knock anymore because you're just going to have this AI. You will regret it. I'm worried the pendulum. Some companies are going to swing the pendulum so far, and then they're going to mess up, and then the pendulum's going to go all the way back, and then eventually we're going to meet back in the middle. But I think if you look at some of these, how can we use this to make us better? How can we use this to showcase ourselves and delight our clients and make our engineers jobs easier and they are more successful? Cool, all day. That's what I'm excited to see. And I think those tools, they're here, they're only getting more advanced. Um, so I do believe that service delivery organizations should be evaluating those types of overlays to just make them better overall.
Really interesting. Really interesting. So, Debbie, these last few questions are for you to share your biggest lessons and advice from your career in service. The first one, it's still field service still quite a heavily male dominated sector. What has been your experience as a female leader, and what practical advice would you give to women in particular coming up in this space?
Well, it's a difficult question for me, and it's not, but it is because I've never participated in that. Like I just don't even think it's a thing, but I know it's a thing. Like I know it's a thing, but I don't participate in it, right? So I think for females in this industry, that's what you have to have. You have to have that attitude. You need to command excellence around you, and that includes from your leaders, your people, from yourself. And you need to be technical enough to be dangerous. You need to be able to sit in the room and act like you've been there before. That's how the woman versus man thing, in my opinion, gets ditched. And lose the just sit there and be pretty attitude. No way. Bring something to the table, own it, own every aspect of it, and challenge. You need to challenge the people around you. I think that a lot of times as females, we don't necessarily feel comfortable with that, or we've been taught we shouldn't. And that's where I would say you got to break that mold. Now, there is a balance. You don't want to appear confrontational or like a problem child, right? So you can't just come in super hot and heavy. You got to have some finesse. But I do think that just you need to know your stuff, you need to own it, and you need to command excellence around you. And suddenly it won't matter what sex you are. People will just they'll say, "Oh, Debbie knows all about this. Did you ask her?" Well, Debbie should probably be in this room because she's the one who understands this better than anybody. Nobody knows our managed services better than her. She needs to come into the room. Like those are the things you start hearing. And then that stigma is gone. I mean, there's still good old boys clubs. There's still these things do exist. And then I think that's where you have to just learn how to be savvy and you have to learn how to maneuver in spite of and circumvent those walls. And then you'll still reach the level of success that you're striving for. You're just going to figure out a different way to do it. Understand what you're working with. Understand what you're working with and then get strategic around it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And for engineers who are listening who want to become managers, or for the managers who want to be better leaders, what are your top practical behaviors that they should start applying to their role today?
Well, the first thing I said, right, was get out there and talk. Go see your people. Get FaceTime. Really, really important. Or at least video calls or what have you. And this is obviously as a leader. For engineers who think they want to be in leadership, I think my biggest piece of advice is remember that, well, one, the best players don't always make the best coaches. So look in the mirror and make sure that you do want to deal with the minutia of management, because there's a difference between management and leadership. And when you get promoted up, you can be a working engineer out in the field and be a leader for your team without taking that management step. When you take that management step, along with it comes a bunch of crap that nobody really wants to do, but we all have to do it because it has to be done. That's where it's the HR stuff, the administrative stuff, the paperwork, the icky, is their productivity high? Maybe you have to go through some rifts. Maybe you have to optimize your workforce, and that means you're not running enough tickets in a certain region, and so you've got to reduce headcount. The yucky stuff comes. That's when it comes. You got to be able to look in the mirror and know that that is something that you're going to want to do, that you're going to strive to do. A lot of times you see managers that never actually did the job of the people they're managing. That's because they don't mind doing the yucky. They don't have to have necessarily done the job. They need to understand the job. They need to understand what their people go through, makes them successful. You need to know the seat your people are sitting in, but it doesn't mean that you had to be a top engineer to become a manager. So I think that is where I say you've got to do that reflection, like what makes you tick. And that being said, the other thing I'm a heavy believer in, and I get kind of made fun of for this, but I believe in those personality tests, where like you get your profile back of, are you extroverted? Are you introverted? Are you a director? Are you this? Are you whatever? You don't have to make all your people take those tests. But as a manager, I have always picked one or two of those profiles that I really understood the different layers to, and then figured out how to quickly put people into those categories. And I do this in a boardroom and with customers and everything. I've been doing this my whole career. Like the DISC profile, or there's one out there called the GEM profile. The GEM one's really easy, so that's a lot of times what I'll go to. But I'll be sitting in a room or I'll be sitting with my employees and I'll be like, oh, they're an Emerald. Okay, Emerald, this is how I need to work with them. This is how I need to communicate to them. These are the types of jobs that historically they would excel in. And then as you help develop your employees throughout their career, you figure out those personality types and you help them figure out their superpowers and how to apply that in their journey and where they're going to live their best life career wise. Don't take somebody who is very operationally minded, incredibly black and white, can't see the gray. Don't put them into a customer success role just because they can talk to you well. They're going to wither on the vine. They're a service delivery manager. You know what I mean? Like, and help your people understand that. So the same thing would go if you're a manager saying you've got a person on your team who thinks they wanted to get into leadership. Well, maybe they have really good management skills, but they're not a leader. You have to help them see that and then coach them, of course, to can they get there? Do they have the core skills to get there? Do they have the personality type to get there? Can we, make some adjustments? Or is it you just got to understand this is not how you're wired? Let's look at this. Have you thought about doing this? You can take these skills and apply it to that. Blah, blah, blah. That to me, though, I think that's really, really important as a manager to do that, to be able to put your team. I had a 95% promotion rate in my job, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. You came to my team to wither the storm And then we figured out what branch to put you on and where to put you. And that was a way that we did that. And people got into very successful roles in their careers through those processes.
Amazing. And I feel like we've come full circle there. We're talking about openness, transparency, and communication, even internally here, and playing to strengths, and really
Yes.
just letting that person excel in what they're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. Tap into their
Yeah,
superpower, and then
exactly. Yeah.
you always want to ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? You can be 55 years old. I'm still going to ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because, you're not learning, you're dying, right? And you're still growing. And especially we talk about the people, our audience today, engineers are lifelong learners. They want to learn, they want to teach, they want to help, and they want to keep learning and growing. You've got to foster that environment for them, or that's when you end up with grumpy, unhappy employees and it impacts the customer experience. It's all full circle.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for that chat. It's just packed full of real insight, and I just really appreciate how practical you made it. We're talking about KPIs, about team performance, tool adoption, and understanding leadership there as well. And if you're listening and you took something useful from this chat, please share the episode with a field service lead or an engineer who'd benefit from hearing this. So yeah, Debbie, thank you once again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.